Hello, I'm Penny Thornton and I'm talking astrology. On this particular video, I'm going to be looking at the full moon in Aries on the 6th or 7th of October. Depends where you are in the world. If you're living in America, it's going to be the 6th of October. And if you're anywhere else in the world, it's going to be on the 7th. Either way, it's in Aries. Things to mention before I get into it, aside from the fact I'm going to take not only look at what's around at this time, so we'll be looking at the full moon in chart form. We'll see how it looks in the horoscopic circle, and I'm also going to be talking about what is surrounding that in the days up to it and the days after it. I also, like to take it, or I will be taking it from the perspective of all 12 signs on this particular video, because I know how much a lot of you really, really like that. All important before we get started, please subscribe, please like. It's all to do with the algorithm. And you think I know about algorithms? Well, I know I'm being told about algorithms. And so it's all important that we make things move so that we can grow the channel. And I know a lot of you are wonderful about this, especially with your comments. So let's get into this. And first things first, this full moon in Aries is known as the harvest moon. And that means it's the first full moon after the autumn equinox or the Libra ingress. And it comes at a time, of course, of the changing of the seasons. Now, in my last video, which was the video on the solar eclipse, we looked at all the things to do with, I suppose so many things globally coming to a head at this time. And I'm going to refer to a few of those things because they do have reference to what's going on in this period as well. The Libra Aries axis, an interesting one. Aries, the first sign of the zodiac. Libra, the 7th sign of the zodiac. You're exactly halfway through the zodiac when you come to Libra. And when we look at these two signs, we think about Aries ruled by Mars. We look at Libra ruled by Venus. And I think I talked about it a lot last year when I was looking at the nodal axis, which was on the Aries-Libra polarity. I talked about this being the axis of war and peace. And my goodness, this is very relevant to all of us at this particular time. Also significant about this full moon, it's a super moon. It's not the biggest super moon of the year. It just means it comes or is closest to the Earth, so it looks much bigger. I can remember as a little girl wondering why the moon changed, its shape. Sometimes it was very big and sometimes it's very small. I remember being very perplexed by it. It's just quite simply, whether, we're closer to the new moon, the full moon, or further from it. That's just to do with the mechanics, the astronomy of the piece, if you like. But the Aries-Libra axis is, we're looking at the cardinal houses, the first house, the 7th house, they're not on the cardinal points, but they're in the cardinal signs, the cardinal houses. And I think every time you get a full moon on the cardinal points, which means we get 4 a year, basically, spring, summer, autumn, and winter, they tend to be full moons that are a little bit more important. They pack a little bit more of a punch. In astrology, we call the cardinal houses the active houses, the doing houses, the shaping and shifting houses. And that applies really when it comes to events that coincide or fall around a full moon like this, or even a new moon like this, and they tend to be more significant. There's more stuff happening at this time. And when you think about it, here we are in October. This is a time where financial markets are showing all sorts of results, and we have all the political party conferences in the United Kingdom. a lot of contracts are up for review in October with a view to the coming year. So this period of the year, we already know without looking at the fact there's a full moon happening on the 6th and 7th of October. We know it's a pretty active, dynamic period of the year. Now, I want to go back before I go forward because I'm recording this on the 22nd of September. In other words, it's a day after the solar eclipse. Now, I talk a lot about eclipses being game changers. And we look at things happening around the time of an eclipse, and they assume greater significance that they would have done otherwise, which is why in our own lives, we should take note of signs and signals around the time of an eclipse, because they could be red lights or green lights. They show us something significant is taking shape. It's not there yet necessarily, but we should note the signs and signals. And it is the same way when we look at world events. And I can remember talking about heads will roll, both in the sense of the total lunar eclipse, which happened on the 7th of September, and also in regard to the solar eclipse, which was opposed to Saturn and Neptune on the 21st of September. There was this theme, heads will roll. And there were an awful lot of things that happened in that period. We look at the period of eclipses and we give them a 2-week kind of, well, we should give them a little bit more of a timeline. But anyway, let's focus a little bit more on the September time and just how many people lost their jobs. I mean, coming into my memory, certainly in the United Kingdom, we had the Deputy Prime Minister, Angela Rayner, had to resign over a kind of mortgage situation, home ownership. And in fact, she was also the housing minister. It couldn't have been more embarrassing. And then just as embarrassing, just as powerful, was the firing of Sir Peter Mandelson, who was the United Kingdom's ambassador to the United States. And of course, he got fired literally 2 days before Donald Trump arrived on these shores for his all-important second state visit. So those were two really big events that have really created ripples through the English kind of system, if you want to think of it that way. But of course, over in America, we had things happening in the CDC throughout all that period of time, the head of the CDC resigning, the people being fired, people walking out. And, you know, there was a lot of kind of sense of people reaching their ceiling. That's it, I'm done, I'm going. And a lot of firings in the same way. And of course, we also did sadly see the passing of some very, very important figures, as we often do. And that's where my saying that the eclipses mark significant endings. So they're not necessarily causing, you know, do the planets cause anything? No, they don't. But they're presiding over it. So deaths of very, very famous people and leaders tend to cluster around eclipses. And I think in particular, well, we have the death of Robert Redford, who's a giant king of Hollywood, if you like. So Joe Bugner, who a lot of people don't know, was an absolutely great boxer, known as much for his amazing skills as his personality. He was a rather extraordinary individual. And then, of course, we had the murder of Charlie Kirk, the right-wing activist, the CEO of Turning Point USA, absolutely huge. And a sort of focal point, in a way, for everything that we're seeing represented by these grand alignments and eclipses. We're seeing so much that is bringing people to a kind of point where everything is at extremes. And so you've got division, you've got extremist actions, You know, people are at extremes, which I think is a very good way of putting it. And of course, I'm speaking at a time when this has only really just happened. So we don't yet know all the ramifications that will occur in the aftermath. And also, you know, we've got some very important heads of state and kings, our own King Charles, who are really at a very important point in their lives. And you know, there is a possibility that, you know, at this particular age, there are changes in the regimes. And I pointed that out ahead of the solar eclipse. As it is, as I talk to you, yeah, there are an awful lot of things going on with the monarchy right now. And I may mention just one other thing shortly, but there hasn't been any great big announcement just yet. But the eclipse is a portent of that. And when this happens, we will see the signature of the eclipse in that particular announcement. So coming back to the monarchy again, I don't know, some of you may read my hellos on my website, astrolutely.com, or my Friday Bites. And if you remember, I was away in Malta having a break, and my book of choice that I was reading on my holiday was entitled, and this is a book by Andrew Lowney about the Duke and Duchess of York. In fact, the subtitle is The Rise and Fall of the House of York. And it was absolutely riveting. I mean, I knew Sarah many years ago. In fact, went to the wedding of her and Andrew. So I'm always interested to see how things evolve in her life. And really, with the next kind of wave of the Epstein papers, so to speak, with what's coming out about who Epstein knew, and obviously the Yorks had a much closer relationship with Jeffrey Epstein than we previously knew, and an email released around the time of the solar eclipse did just reveal how close indeed she had been to Jeffrey, how much she appreciated his friendship and everything else. Well, the result of that has been, and will continue to be, she had to leave a certain charity. There will be other charities that would follow. So it made me want to see, you know, what was going on in her chart. And she has a moon in Aries. She is a Libra. She has a moon in Aries. And so this full moon in Aries on top of the eclipse, which connected with her Virgo planet, she's got a Virgo midheaven, they all kind of come together and mark a point at which a lot of things come to a head. It's almost like reaping a harvest. And we think of the harvest, I suppose, a little bit more with the idea of Virgo, don't we? So Pisces, Virgo, solar eclipse, Virgo. But in the same period of time, with this full moon brewing in Aries Libra, we get the idea, I think, that sometimes it takes years before something comes to completion. Remember, full moon, if we have a little tagline to it, it's closure and completion. It doesn't mean, you know, you just close and complete after a month or an event that happened weeks ago. It can be years. It just depends. And we don't always know what that closure and completion is going to be about. It's a very useful phrase because we think we can tick a lot of boxes and say, oh, that's done. Isn't that good? What an accomplishment. Put it away, it's done. Or things can rise to the bubble and we think, oh, my goodness, this is now exposed. This is the end of everything for me, you know. And there's many, many ways we can look at closure and completion. And while I think about it, it's only just recently that I think the Hillsborough finally got some closure and completion. Because of the new law to do with being more forward and you know, the police, what's going on. There's now an imperative really to say what's going on, not to try to keep everything under the hat, which of course is what happened with the Hillsborough disaster. 30 odd years, these people were waiting for answers, and which was shocking. That has all changed in this time of the shadow of the eclipses, so to speak. So where did I want to go from here? Just in the same way, talking about closure and completion, there is a way of looking at events and the process of time between the beginning and the end of that event, or the beginning and the end of a stage, a process, however way you want to interpret it. And that is if we go back to the preceding new moon in that sign. In other words, if we go back to the new moon in Aries, there is a reference from the events around that time to those that fall around the time of this full moon in Aries. And I went back and I had a look at some of the things I thought were particularly significant around the time of the Aries new moon, which of course was a solar eclipse. So in a way, this full moon, which closes this cycle between the new moon and full moon, is even a little bit more important, and not just to Aries or to Libra, but just generally speaking, when we look out at events in the world that, of course, impact us as well. And, on the hours before the solar eclipse in Aries, there was that huge Myanmar earthquake. Remember, that was absolutely devastating. Mark Carney was elected leader of the Liberal Party in Canada, and then, of course, he has now become Canada's leader. We also had Marine Le Pen, who was the head of the far-right party in France. She was found guilty of embezzling funds, so she can no longer be the head of her party. Also, the South Korean president was removed, and if you remember, there was a real Mexican standoff between the police. He holed up in the presidential house, and it went on for days. So, and last but not least, how could we forget this, was the death of Pope Francis. So you can sort of see, looking back, just what important events cluster around eclipses. And again, in reference to where we are now, just around that solar eclipse in Aries, Donald Trump announced Liberation Day. And that was when he put all these tariffs on various countries in the world that were a tiny little bit shocking. So I expect that as we come to this October full moon, we're going to really be able to judge whether those tariffs have done what he believed they would do and made America richer, or whether they've done the reverse. And what I would say here is maybe we shouldn't listen to Donald Trump's version of events, because he's always very positive about what happens. And perhaps instead we should look at some real financial voices who can give an objective viewpoint about just how successful these tariffs were, and various other moves and policies made by the administration at that time. Another thing that I want to bring up at this point, again, going back, we're now looking at only a week or 2 weeks ago as I'm recording this, and we say, take note of what happens in an eclipse period, because even small things can have great significance. And what really drew my attention to this was the three, I won't call them attacks, we'll call them incursions. We think about Russia. So these incursions, 3 of them from Moscow, first of all, well, we look at Poland. There were 19 drones went over Poland. They were shot down. Then we had Romania, and then there were jets sent into Estonia, 12 minutes of time, I think. And of course, these are deliberate. It's no point saying they're accidental. They absolutely aren't. They are deliberately provocative. And so we've got to analyze really, why would the Putin administration do such things? You know, I mean, it puts Europe, NATO on an alert, admittedly, but one can only assume that if a jet fighter was actually shot down, that might constitute or give Russia its right to play its familiar victim role and say, you know, how crazy and, you know, NATO is. But I suspect it's much more subtle than that. It isn't just saber rattling. It's a lot more than that. And I think we've got to put all these things together and not be kind of disingenuous about it. We've got cyber attacks going on all the time. In fact, on the solar eclipse, there was a huge cyber attack on the ticketing systems and check-in at airports, Berlin, Heathrow, and I think Brussels were all caught up in this, and it just ground everything to a halt. When we think about all the cables, the undersea cables being cut in the Baltic, there was also a flight over the Baltic in these last few days that had to be turned around from Russia. So we're looking at all of this, and as I said, I don't think we can be disingenuous. We are, in a way, already at war with Russia. It's a kind of silent, understated, Neptunian state of affairs, isn't it? Now you see it, now you don't. What is the meaning of that? What had just happened then? It's not a phony war as there was just before World War II, but it is a kind of war of significance, and it needs watching. And you know, my feeling is, I mean, there's a lot of diplomacy to go on. There's a lot of things that can happen in the meantime. But I suspect things of this nature are just going to get more and more blatant until finally we put boots on the ground, and there we are. Of course, a lot can happen before then. And, you know, when I come to my conclusion, and we're talking about fear, I don't think we should be fearful. We should just be alert. We should just be aware of what's going on and prepared to have a dialogue, whether it's with our senators and Congress people, or whether it's with our MPs, our members of parliament. We need to keep a dialogue going, because things done in awareness, in full consciousness, are much more, well, we're much more able to handle them better than we are when we're in a complete fog of, you know, either denial or understanding. And as I said, I'll refer to that when I come to my conclusion. So let me take you through what's going on, and we can look at the chart of the full moon. And so we're really looking at the period just leading up to that full moon, and really just imminently after it. So as we can see, I have set this full moon up for Washington, not for any reason that I'm going to make, you know, statements about what it means for America. It was just one of the places where I looked at, and we could really see the configurations very nicely. And I like to be able to see things very clearly. So we can see the full moon at 14 degrees of Libra. Sorry, the sun is 14 degrees of Libra, and the moon is 14 degrees of Aries, and it's north and south. We've got the sun looking as though it's a midnight position, and the moon up there at the noon position. But one thing that did kind of interest me about this the time of the full moon, setting up the chart of the full moon, that the ascending point, 14 degrees of Cancer, is in fact the sun of the United States, which is quite interesting. And not only that, this full moon falls on the axis of the natal Saturn in the USA chart. Saturn is at 14 degrees of Libra in the US chart. And of course, as we know, that Saturn-Neptune conjunction is floating around the IC of the United States. So although I don't want to interpret this full moon pattern from the perspective of the United States, I wanted to serve as a general example. I do think it's quite interesting. It's brought out these factors. So we should recognize at this point that this is a very important period for the United States. And, you know, when we think about Saturn, this is about the government, this is about law, it's about order, it's about the Constitution. We can see that this full moon is probably going to be a period when all sorts of issues and judgments and legal matters are all going to be firing away in reference to the United States. And in this regard, it's going to be a difficult full moon, even though sometimes things have to get worse before they get better. And maybe too, we're seeing in this, because it's the United States Saturn that's being picked up by this full moon, that again, there's going to be a loss of a figure of importance. And you know, when we think the United States has already lost Robert Redford and it lost Charlie Kirk, you know, who next? And this sense heads will roll, people will leave their posts. That's really quite strong in this chart as well. Now, I want to refer also to, if you look here, you'll see the planet Mars, which is at 10 degrees of Scorpio and 5 minutes, and it's in the position, the 5 o'clock position of the circle here. And Mars is still angling Pluto, which is in the 3 o'clock position, even though it's a little bit wide by this time. But it was very, very strong in the week preceding, well, in fact, just after the solar eclipse and through to the following week as we got into October. And Mars-Pluto aspects are all about push coming to shove. So we've got a lot of things going on, whether it's with Israel and Palestine, and you know, you've now got Australia and Canada and the United Kingdom recognizing the state of Palestine. That's certainly ratcheting up the you know, the aggro, we could call it that, between Israel. So that Mars-Pluto square, we can see how angry people are. We can see how extreme things are getting. It is fortunately fading away, and it's going to be quite some time before we reach the Mars-Pluto conjunction, which will happen in 3 or 4 months' time. So on the day of the full moon itself, we have Mercury squaring Pluto. Mercury will be in a 5th, well, it will be, yes, it will be just on the cusp of the 5th house, in as much as Pluto is in the 7th house here, but just edging towards the 8th. But let's not worry too much about house positions, other than to see where planets are located as you look at them. And let's just talk about a Mercury-Pluto square. Mercury, the principle of communication, of discussion and debate, of movement, of commerce. Pluto, the planet of transformation, of elimination. We get the idea of buried issues being revealed. We think about elephants in the living room when we think about Mercury and Pluto. Who's going to talk about the elephant in the living room? And so potentially at this full moon, there will be a lot coming out. You know, information reaching us, whatever country you're in, whether you're in Australia, whether you're in Poland, whether you're in Turkey, wherever you may be, it's likely that information that's coming out is fairly shocking. It's information that's been buried. It's information that we need to know, and it's going to change the shape of things, the way we look at it, the way we look at certain people involved in it, and that's just a general pattern. If we look at a Mercury-Pluto square in our own lives, this is a good time to get to the bottom of something. If you have to investigate, analyze, research something, you're going to be able to do it really, really well. But it will be very easy at this particular period, especially on the day of the full moon itself, that if you're in discussion and it's a hot topic, it's a delicate area, things could rapidly disintegrate. And before you know where you are, people are giving ultimatums, and that's it. So we have to be careful with our communications around this time. Now, what's more significant as we come to the 11th of October, Venus will have entered Libra, and it will be opposing Neptune. And of course, by association, it will be opposing Saturn as well. We've got Saturn and Neptune in the mix. Now, what that does is create this formation known as a kite. We have Uranus in Gemini, here on the kind of 11 o'clock position, in aspect to Neptune and Saturn and the midday position, and again, a link to Pluto in that 3 o'clock position. So Uranus, Neptune, Saturn, Pluto are aligned. Technically, they're in harmony, but there's no way you could put these 4 planets together and see harmony. This is nuclear. You know, I've talked a lot about Neptune, Uranus, and Pluto, all lending their names to aspects of nuclear weaponry, right? Plutonium, Neptunium, and uranium all have been discovered since 1781. So we know they're nuclear in action. And the minute we put a personal planet in the mix, and in this case, it will be Venus, because Venus will oppose Saturn and Neptune in the center of that, and then you'll get a trine from Uranus to Venus, a trine from Venus to Pluto. It puts together this kite formation. And the kite formation, its central strut, is that Venus opposition Neptune-Saturn. Now, throughout the year, we've had planets making and creating this configuration, personal planets or the full moon or whatever it's been. It's been constantly playing. We've had some very powerful configurations. And it's like a full symphony orchestra playing at pitch when you've got everything vibrating, resonating on the same degree area. That's why things are huge. There's nothing minor about events. They're all or they're nothing. And it is also a period of humanity's evolution where things are changing very fast. We think about the advent of artificial intelligence. We look at all sorts of other things that are going on that will change the way we live, we work, and our horizons. It is this collection of the outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, combined with Saturn, that's in play. They are in this sequence. They're in these on these degree areas, and have been for all of 2025. This is what made 2025, or what makes 2025 this hugely significant year, because of the idea of their presiding over great advances, but also great conflict. And I think we need to examine this. And I know that a lot of astrologers and mystics look at, take the astrology and think, well, this is really so exceptional. Consciousness is changing, all of that kind of stuff. And I want to just point out that consciousness, another word for consciousness is awareness. And if we go back through time, we look at the Renaissance, we even go back to the Stone Age and the invention of the wheel. It's these inventions that change everything, that change humanity's view of the world and expand consciousness. They come together. And this is why, in a way, this is a very exciting period, because we are making huge advances in science, in AI, all these things, and they're going to change humanity's view. Our awareness is changing, and that's the way consciousness is changing. And I think that's a really, really important thing. And even though we are finding these times difficult and things are at extremes, it's only when we are forged in the fire of such things that we grow. And I want to look at that in its most positive way and say that we may not like what's going on, but ultimately, once we're through this portal, we'll have learned so much, and we will be on to a new era, really, of the human evolution. Let's put it that way. So yes, so it's going to be, this is why this period of time, and we can look really from the full moon on the 6th, 7th of October through to really, I would say, about the 14th of October, when Venus will be at that opposition point, creating that kite. Well, it's a really happening period, for want of a better word. Other things to mention in and around this time is Pluto in Aquarius is now turning direct. It turns direct on the 14th of October. So in the days beforehand, which will cover the full moon and these other things I talked about, and when a planet is stationary, it's going to turn direct or it's going to turn retrograde. It is at its most powerful. It is at its most present. So all things to do with transformation, to do with elimination, rebirth, revelations, all those things that are applicable to Pluto are also going to be strong themes that we'll be looking at, experiencing, witnessing during this period that covers the full moon in Aries. And it's, as I said, it's applicable to our individual lives every bit as much as it is in global or mundane terms. So I want to come back to me now, because I'm going to look at this full moon and its meaning and everything else I've talked about, sign by sign. Now, some of you who are new to my channel may not be sure, what sign should they look at? And I say, well, you need to take your sun sign first of all. You know what sign your sun is in, so that's what you listen to first and foremost. However, if you know your ascending sign, and more importantly, the degree of your ascending sign, then you will know exactly where this full moon is occurring and everything else I'm going to be talking about. And so listen to that as well. Don't worry about your moon sign unless your moon is in Aries and around that degree, 6 to 10, 3 to 6 of Aries, then this full moon will have quite a meaning for you. It's bringing out the natal pattern of your chart. It's really pressing all your emotional buttons. But otherwise, I don't look at things from the perspective of the moon. So we're just talking about the sun and the ascendant. And I must apologize. I had a really bad cough and cold, and I keep, excuse me, being caught out on this video. So I apologize when my voice runs out and I have to start again, but these things, they have to be lived with. I'm not ill, I've just got a cough. Okay, so no more ado, let us start going through the signs, and I'm going to start with the sign of Aries because, of course, the full moon is in your sign. So as you look at the image, the horoscope circle where the moon is, the moon in Aries is in your first solar house. Your sun is in the 7th solar house in Libra, And you see I've joined Venus in there, so you can see this beautiful kite formation as it forms in reference to your zodiacal position. So the first house is about me. It's about who I am, my appearance, how I go out to the world. It's about my personal ambitions, what I put my personal stamp on. And so a full moon here brings a sense of completion. It may be that you've been working on a project and it's very personally driven and it's done and dusted. And maybe it also means you've reached the end of a cycle and a new personal cycle is shortly going to begin for you. And of course, we'll be looking at the new moon in Aries on the 21st of October for that. The moon in the first house, the sun in the seventh. If the first house is me, then the seventh house is we. It's us. It's other people in your life. It's other people's impact on your life. And the most important aspect of this full moon is that it has to do with a relationship. Now, it can be the fulfillment of a relationship. And if you're listening to me as an Aries and you're going to get married in the near future, or you've just met somebody and you feel this is my other, that's what this full moon is symbolizing. On the other hand, a full moon can separate as well because you've come to the end of a cycle in regard to relationships. So it's the end. It may be that it's a parting of the ways just for a short period of time, so that when you come back together again, you'll be starting a new cycle. Or it could be really a complete parting of the ways, that you've gone as far as you can with this relationship. It's done and dusted. And of course, we've got that Mercury-Pluto square at the same time. And it makes me think you have to be particularly careful, Aries, of not having arguments over money, either with a business partner or with a life partner, someone else, because it could get really acrimonious. And before you know where you are, the relationship is under the bus and it's over money. So keep that in your awareness. Awareness is everything. If we are aware about the potential of this full moon to alienate and separate, and the addition of the Mercury-Pluto square to bring things to a tipping point, push comes to shove, acrimony, upset, then to be aware of all that will mean you don't have to go there. Now, as you'll also see here, Venus is shortly going to enter your seventh house. Now, when that happens, it makes it a prime period for forming new relationships and doing a lot of things in regard to love and relationships and business relationships too. So Venus then becomes the focal point for that big kite configuration. So back we come into the area of relationships, something significant happening to a love relationship or a working relationship, something happening to your partner, which makes for changes in your relationship. All of that is going to be in there at this important period of the year. But if we come back and we think about the full moon being in your sign, it is a time of empowerment. And I want you to think about this carefully, because it doesn't mean that you've got power and you must throw your weight around. It's more subtle than that. It's a sort of recognition of the power you have. And what you need with that is the wisdom to use it well. Okay, Aries? Taurus. If we look at the full moon in red, as we can see it there, we find the sun in the sixth house, the moon in the 12th house. Now, this is one of the more mystical areas of the zodiacal circle. The 12th house, of course, you may be familiar with the idea that this is the area that links us to the infinite, whatever is beyond reality. That's the infinite, if you like. It goes on, it's intangible. All those words are appropriate for the 12th house. It's our unconscious mind. It's the seat of our spiritual life, if you like. So when you look at a full moon here, the opposite point where the sun is in the area of service. It's the working area of the horoscope. It is what we do on an everyday basis. It's the work of life that we do, and the work of life contributes to our spiritual journey. This is why I use the word savor so much with the 6th house, because in savor, that spiritual practice of doing service, doing your duty, the mundane duties of life, is in a way an act of service to others, and in a way is your spiritual path as well. So aside from this being a very spiritual period for you, one where you may feel enlightened, one where you may feel a great sense of understanding about your life and your purpose. It's also a time when you may realize that you have pushed yourself too far. This is a classic full moon that brings out burnout. So if you're listening to me, Taurus, and you're thinking, yeah, I am pressing the pedal to the metal, and then you'll know to push it back a little bit, because it's the full moon which will tip you over the edge, and you'll think, oh, I can't, I can't go on. So just before the full moon, try to take it a little easier. And best of all, on the full moon day, if you can take a day off, if you can take a little bit more rest and relaxation, do so. Your dreams could be particularly important around the time of the full moon. So even if they seem a bit random, and they're not, like scenes in a film, they're just sort of random images, write them down, because they may well have a reference to something going on in your life, and you're getting this extra insight into what they mean. And of course, that means also how to react to them, what to do with them. Now, for a few Taurians, this full moon is about the end of a job. You're done and dusted. You're leaving that job, or maybe you're leaving that department and you're going into a new department. Or maybe it's retirement. You're done. You're no longer working that way. Or it can be a way you're working, a project you're working on, and it's come to an end. I would also say, looking at this pattern here, with Mercury and Pluto also in the mix on the full moon day, that if there are any tensions in the office or with workers and fellow workers, they're probably going to hit a kind of really difficult point at this time. But to know that means that you can get in there and ameliorate things, make them better, because you know what's going on. Now, I've also drawn in this Venus opposition, Saturn, Neptune. We've got Uranus and Pluto in there, so that we're looking at this kite configuration. This is where the focus for all this kind of powerful resonance that we're having, which I talked about in the main section on this video, which is why, lots of people are talking about changes in humanity. It's because lots of things are happening that are advancing us, but at the same time causing a lot of conflict. And when we put Venus in the midst here, we can see this more personally coming in the area of work again. Could it be that you've been avoiding making a career decision? Often we stick with a job because it puts a roof over our head, but yet things are going on that are very difficult to really withstand. And that maybe what this is all about, combined with that full moon, is I'm done. It's the end of a job. You've run out of road, the last straw, all of that. And it's healthy and it's right. This is what we learn from astrology. When these things happen, they're meant to be, but they are in our best interests, that new things will come out of this, and we need to be removed from situations that are causing us grief and, in fact, not helping us fulfill our real destiny. Gemini. This full moon falls on the axis of creativity. This is a really important one because it means a period of gestation is over and a birth is set to occur, whether that occurs in the next couple of weeks or whether it's a little further away. A certain gestation period is over. We don't have to think of this in terms of babies developing in the womb, although we could, but we can think about projects. We can also think about love affairs. We can think about relationships. They have a beginning. They have a very early stage, about 3 months to 6 months, which is where that solar eclipse at the end of March may come in. You may have begun a relationship or something at that time. And here you are at the full moon. Is it done and dusted? Has it done everything it could have done? Or is it ready to morph into a new stage of its development? Is it over and done with in a kind of heated Mercury-Pluto way? Or is it just simply the time, we sense sometimes that something is done, it can't go any further. We've also got Venus moving into Libra and the 5th house around about the 11th of September, of October. And the minute that happens, this configuration, Kite configuration, is brought to life. So there may have been other instances throughout the year where love affairs have hit crunch points. There's been a lot of breaking up and coming back together again. Or you've been through a lot of dating experiences. Or maybe there's been something related to children, your offspring, and that there's been things happening to them that have caused quite a lot of ripples in your life. But here comes another one. And I'd like to think that with the addition of the full moon in the mix, that anything that's been troubling or has had a giant question mark over it could be resolved. And if it's not resolved on and around the day of the full moon, then give it the waning period, which means the whole period until the 21st of October and the new moon. I think when we look at full moons on this creative axis, a lot of our ability to be creative in all sorts of ways is to the fore. And when we are putting our whole selves into something, it can be a joy. Now, we don't always get an opportunity to do that. And I often talk about being creative to people, and they say, oh, well, no, I'm not a creative type. But you can be creative in the kitchen, you can be creative with finance. There's so many ways that creativity can happen. And I think this full moon is also urging you to find your creative talents and to focus on them, because particularly when times are difficult, when we get involved with something, when we're living our passion and doing our passion, it's a wonderful therapy. And we find once we're doing that, we can cope with the rest of our lives much better. Cancer. This full moon is on the 10th, 4th axis. In other words, the full moon itself is in the 10th house of career and life direction, and the sun is in the 4th house of home and family. The 4th house really represents the roots of life. And if you could imagine the horoscope as a tree, and we think about the branches stretching out to the world, the ascendant-descendant axis, and we think about the roots of life going endlessly into history, our family tree, and coming up in terms of where the 10th house is, which is where we're going to, our trajectory, who we want to be, what we want to do, our aspirations. This is an important full moon. It has to do with all those things. It has to do with our family, our roots. It has to do with our aspirations, our career. Now, not everybody has a career, either because you don't need one or because you've retired. And so sometimes when I say this, it can seem, well, I don't have a job, so what's this about? But you almost certainly have aspirations. And we get this idea of a conclusion with a full moon. So it may mean that a project that you've been working on, something that you really want to have happen, it's an aspiration, it's an ambition. You've achieved it, and this full moon helps you achieve it. But it could also be that something is over, it's done. And if we think about jobs here, that it may be what's being symbolized here is the end of a job. Maybe voluntarily, you don't want it anymore, so you're leaving. Or maybe it's not voluntary and there are all sorts of company changes or something happening in where you work, and that position is no longer there for you. But of course, that leaves it open for new territory, which will hopefully be starting to come about when we get to that new moon on the 21st of October. But it's also about home too, isn't it? The end of a cycle for family life, the end of a cycle for home life. Does this mean you're going to move home? Does it mean you've got members of the family moving out? Is it that empty nest time? It could be for a lot of Cancerians. And so this full moon is really marking a period during which you may feel very overwhelmed with the things that are going on in your family. Now, we also see the importance and significance of that Kite configuration here, when we see Venus coming into the fourth house, trining Neptune, trining Pluto, and then we see the Neptune-Saturn conjunction in the center of it, forming the strut. I think particularly if you are a June Cancerian, then this period of October is going to be very important to you. Things are going to change. We don't know whether that means fabulous, you're going to be jumping up and down, the change is fabulous, and the opportunities are fabulous, or whether you'll feel rather disappointed and discouraged. That we don't know from the astrology. It's a wait and see situation. But what we do know about astrology and what astrology is so good for in terms of when we learn about astrology is it teaches us, how in life a failure gives way to success, an ending gives way to a beginning. And we see this endless flow of life, this sine wave of desolation to consolation going on all the way through our lives. And as we look at that, it gives us a much more philosophical way of looking at the things that come and go, whether they are indeed jobs or whether they're family members or whether they're, activities and friends, whatever they may be. We know that the endless cycle of life continues on and that despair will be replaced by hope, failure by success, and so on. Leo. Well, this full moon takes place in one of my favorite areas of the horoscope. It's in the 9th house of far horizons. And we can take that literally and metaphorically. In other words, it's where we travel. It can mean distant places, whether we mean distant states, if you're within the same country, or it can mean different countries, really going from one end of the earth to the other. Far horizons. But it's also, when we say your horizons are widening, we think about opportunities coming to you that are widening your view. And we can think too about your own kind of aspirations, not in quite the same way as we might in the 10th house. Think about, this is the job I want, and that's, the place I want to be in and all of that. It's more about looking along the trajectory of your life and thinking about, where am I going to be in 20 years' time, in 30 years' time, in 5 years' time? And think, can I get to where I want to be from where I am now? And if you really have to think about that, this full moon is really important, because it says to you, if where you are now, you have absolutely no chance of getting where you want to be, it's time to really do something about it. And that might be to cut out some activities, even some, I'm not saying cut out friends, but maybe time spent with friends or with a friend who perhaps may take up too much of your time. So you need to think about, how can I get to where I want to be by looking at where I am now? And that full moon will help you bring an end to things that are not in, they're not in your best interest when it comes to where you want to be further down the line. It might have something to do with a course. This is, the ninth house is about higher education. It's about philosophy. It's about ancient knowledge. It's about all sorts of things that are a little rarefied. So it may be that you've completed a course and you have, or what's in view are qualifications and extra skills. Also, when we look at this full moon on this axis, we're looking at the idea of the end of a journey. So that's going to be different from Leo to Leo, but it's a nice way to look at something that you've been on, that has taught you a lot, that has taken you through a lot of portals, and that coming to the end of it means you're in a different position from where you were at the start of it, more aware, more knowledgeable, more enlightened even. So the end of a journey is there in that way, but it's also the end of a journey, maybe quite literally, that you've been traveling and you're coming home, or you're traveling and you've got to your destination, and obviously something new will begin from there on. As you will see, I've drawn out the kite configuration here. We see Venus coming into the third house, opposing Neptune and Saturn, and linking to Uranus and Pluto. That all-important 6 to, let's say, 15th, 16th period of October, being when things happen which might seem to you to be of a kind of fateful nature, or there are things that happen that you can see are sort of partly constructing your future. Let's put it that way. The Venus-Neptune-Saturn opposition is interesting because we're playing around with the theme of dreams coming true, or the realization that your dreams can't come true. That's what Saturn and Neptune are loosely saying, at least at one aspect of their combination. So it may be that this is another thing that comes to you around the time of the full moon, the realization that, that dream isn't the right one for you, or it needs a lot of tweaking if it's going to come true. But on the other hand, so too is the prospect of a dream coming true. And Venus forming that strut of that kite is giving that potential. So Virgo, you've had 2 very important lunations in your life recently. You had the lunar eclipse on the 7th of September, you had the solar eclipse on the 21st of September, and now we come to this full moon. So a lot of things are going to be packaged by now. Some of the things that may have happened in the last 6 to 8 weeks, you've been able to process, and you'll be able to say, okay, I can wrap that up. It's great experience. Something now is prepared, and I can go forth in this new direction with this new person or this new project, whatever may be appropriate. This full moon falls on the axis of finances. So finance is probably in the mix. Is it that during this time you've been grappling with a lot of financial responsibilities? Maybe there've been a lot of drains on your income, or maybe there've been real problems with settlements or inheritances. Well, this full moon is saying, you know what, that period is over. There's no more kind of debate about it. It's done. And I would say that it's a good thing to settle. And if whatever you're engaged in has that aspect to it, there's been a back and toing, there's been offers, there've been refusals, all of that's been going on, and negotiation, that it's probably a good idea to settle on that full moon. And whether less is more is appropriate, or whether it's just save yourself a whole lot of hassle, think of that if it comes to signing off on something or signing up to something. This area of the chart has a lot to do with our own self-worth. And, when we've got money in the bank and we live in a solid home and we've got assets, I think our stability is good. And when we feel stable and secure in life, we're able to kind of express ourselves and feel confident. But when money is short, when we've got problems, when perhaps people aren't treating us too well, we don't feel valued for the work we do or the gifts that we offer, then our confidence really suffers. So I think this full moon is a time to really, really get on top of this, really to examine why it is you feel dismissed or undervalued or not getting enough of what you need. Now, is this partly your problem because you haven't made it clear, you haven't stood up for your own needs? Or is it that you have stood up for them and it doesn't make any difference? So I think you've got to look at the situation at this point, whatever is at odds and you're not getting what you need. It is a time to say, I either have to cut my losses here, I have to leave this relationship, I have to leave this job, I have to stop this pattern, whatever it is. Or you think of ways to make the adjustment, but always bringing it back to yourself. In other words, if you know that you are a person full of value and you know that what you give out is full of value, then that's it. That's it, full stop. The fact that other people don't appreciate it, the fact that you're not getting paid what you deserve, that, all that is happening is not a reflection on you as a person, and it must never be a reflection of you as a person. And the minute you really get your mind around that, and you really feel it in the center of your solar plexus, you know your value, I promise you, things will change. It's when we allow things to get to us and we complain to other people, we feel upset and all those things, and we sort of get a little bit fetus-like about it all. The minute we start to strengthen our core and think about, goodness, this is who I am, this is what I do, this is great, and you really feel it, then the energy around you changes and the situations that are causing you to feel this way will start to change. And I think that's quite interesting because when we look at the Kite configuration I've drawn out for you, its center point is money. It's about values. It can also be about sex, I have to say, that maybe you're not getting what you need, or whatever you are getting you don't like. So it isn't always about money. It's about, well, when we think of subjects that are taboo, sex, death, money, and this is all in the area of the 2nd and 8th house. And that's what needs awareness bringing to it, and patterns stopping and endings coming, so that we release a much better set of circumstances for ourselves. Okay. And I think really with that Saturn-Neptune combination in that triangle we can see at the top there, it is all about what we are striving for, what our dreams are made of, and how to really make our dreams substantial. It all comes back to you. It comes back to having that core belief in yourself. What a strong message this full moon in Aries is sending you, I have to say, Virgo. Libra. Well, of course, the sun is in Libra, your sign at the moment. And there we have the moon in your opposite sign of Aries. We have the sun in your first solar house and the moon in your seventh solar house. So we are on the axis of relationships. The first house is you personally. It is about your appearance. Everything is very personal to you, your personal goals, your personal aims, personal beliefs, and how you come across to other people, how you present yourself to others. That's the first house. The seventh house is about how other people impact you, the way other people are drawn to you, your interaction with them, the impact they have on your life. And of course, it's called the relationship axis, the first seventh house. So the full moon does two very opposite, or performs two very opposite functions. On the one hand, it unites. On the other hand, it separates. So we've got the potential for union here. And if you're currently figuring out, when to get married, or you've just met someone and the whole issue of do we move in together, whatever it is, then this full moon is all about setting it on course, completing that, becoming a unit, a union. On the other hand, if your relationship has been through many moons and you're at the end of it, really, that there's not much more, you've thrown everything but the kitchen sink at it, then this is the time to say, you know what, let's part in good faith. Let us say, we are done. Let us part as friends and let us release each other for an independent existence. I mean, that all sounds wonderful, doesn't it? But of course, we all know, as we've gone through relationship breakups, they're absolutely horrible, almost all of them. But we've all gone through them. And I think, as I said to a couple of the other signs, this idea of the endless cycle of life, from desolation to consolation, from failure to success, from despair to happiness, it's running through, that sine wave runs through our lives from birth to death. So often when you're at the very bottom of things can't get worse. A relationship can't be any worse than this. We're at the bottom of that wave, and actually from this point on, they're going to start to get better. Now, in some cases, that's going to mean that after some incident and certainly some dialogue, because remember, on the full moon day, Mercury will be squaring Pluto after a very heated discussion, one that uncovers perhaps a lot of things that have been hidden. So there are revelations and secrets being released, all of those things. After all that has happened, the relationship can be worked on and moved forward. But, depending on everything that has been released or revealed, it may be that you can't go on. And that's what we're looking at with this full moon. And it doesn't have to be a romantic relationship or a relationship like marriage. It can be a working relationship, a business partnership, your relationship with a company, a friendship even. And with Mercury and Pluto on the same day as that full moon, it will be easy for things to spiral out of control and for things to be said that neither party means. So if you're aware of that, I think it will help any negotiation or discussion. As to Venus's entry into your sign, which occurs just before the 11th, and then opposes Saturn and Neptune almost immediately, a Venus transit of your sign is a very good period, a 4-week period where things can really go your way. Venus smiles on you. But in this position, where we see her opposing the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, trining Uranus, trining Pluto, so picking out this Kite configuration, this is crunch point. This is make or break point for a relationship, for something that has your heart, that of course is very personal to you. Scorpio. This full moon is taking place in the 6th solar house. The sun is in the 12th house. the moon in the 6th house. Now, this is an interesting passage because really since the 22nd of September, the sun has been in the 12th house and is going to continue in that 12th house till about the 23rd of October. So there are many things about the 12th house that are worth knowing about because it's a very occluded house. It's a house where we should be resting and rebooting our energies. We should be looking after our health, our spiritual health, our mental health, our physical health, in preparation for the sun coming into your own sign in October or November. So the 12th house, as I said, is this occluded, hidden house. We're often not making much sense of the world when the sun is in the 12th house. Things are getting past us. We're trying to figure things out. We feel we're being kept out of the loop. We may not even feel very well. We may not really feel on top of things. So we have a full moon coming up, and all those kind of things reach ahead. So if you've been overdoing it, you've been, pushing your body or your mind or your emotions, everything's going to snap on that full moon. And remember, we've got Mercury squaring your ruling planet Pluto at that time as well. So the idea of something snapping may be quite accurate. So be prepared for this full moon. Take it easy just before it. Try to kind of dissolve tensions that there may be with you and another person. But there are other things about this full moon that I think are worthy of consideration, especially if you are aware you're on a spiritual path, because this full moon, it has a lot to do with spiritual awakening and the realizations of things in a spiritual way. The 6th house, a lot of people think of that as just to do with work, but no, it's much more important than that. The 6th house is where we do the work of life. It's where we do the work of spirit. So the moon being in that area and the sun, you may even experience a sense of your calling. And certainly your dreams and your intuitions may suggest I should be doing something. And I think it has to do with serving others. I think I need to be working in an area where what I do is of use to other people. I'm not interested in just doing something for the sake of doing it. So those questions or those thoughts may be coming to you. And of course, a full moon is a time to make them not necessarily concrete, but at least to come to some kind of decision in your own mind. Remember, we talk about full moons and conclusions, and a conclusion can be an understanding. But of course, we can have other things that amount to a conclusion about a situation. And I think coming back to the whole issue of health and well-being, that a situation that you're dealing with could well reach its peak at this point, after which it may dissipate. But certainly if you've been avoiding looking into some kind of dental problem or an ache or a pain or something that's not working right, you really probably need to address it on that full moon so that you can knock it on the head and, resolve it. That's the whole purpose of anything with a full moon, is to bring it to a head. We've also got Venus, of course, as she enters Libra, forming that configuration. And in a way, everything I've just said applies to this, to this configuration. And it is about awareness. It's about the awareness of what's really going on. It's the awareness of what you really want. It's the awareness of what you're really here for. These are big things. At least this is how they present themselves in this astrological pattern. Sagittarius. This full moon for you is on the axis of gestation. And the minute we think about gestation, at least I do, maybe this is because I'm a woman, but I always think about how long it takes for a baby to form and be born. Those 9 months are the gestation period. But of course, we can have gestation periods for a relationship, a love affair, We can have a gestation period for a project we're working on, something we're busying away on. It could be a social endeavor. It could be a creative, artistic endeavor. It could be an entrepreneurial, work-related endeavor. But the idea is that a period of preparation has come to an end, and shortly something will come of what's been in preparation. Now, of course, this may tie in very nicely because you're sitting listening to me and you're almost 9 months pregnant. That's obvious, isn't it? You're about to bring a baby into the world. But the chances are there's only a handful of you who would fit that category. But what you might be doing is incubating something. Could it be a love affair that hasn't really got anywhere, but you're hoping that it's going to manifest into something? That could be something. Or could it be that you've been dating someone for a while and you're wondering where this relationship is going? Is it going to be a full committed relationship, or was it just a fling? Was it just a thing? You're likely to know around the time of this full moon. But what I would also add in this is knowing that on full moon day, there is a Mercury-Pluto square. You probably want to try to keep everything as calm and rational as you can, because things can, collapse quickly when you've got a combination like this, things that are stressful. And there's a lot of kind of interference in the resonance factors going on with life, if we could put it that way. Just like a radio station, in the old days when we had radios that you needed to tune, there was a lot of static going on before you got into the program. And it's the same way sometimes with a Mercury-Pluto square combined with a full moon, there's a lot of static. And what you want to do is have the patience to tune it into a station. Okay, perhaps it's not a very good metaphor, but you know what I'm talking about. I think generally when I look at your chart at the moment and I see this very important Kite configuration coming up, I'm not saying life is easy, but I'm saying that it's got a lot of potential. And I think half the time, Sagittarius, you give up too easily, or you just try, I think, sometimes to, in your desire to put a good spin on something, you don't actually let a situation take its full course, and it probably needs to get deeper and more complicated before it's done. And I think you're probably denying yourself some kind of happy ending here, simply because you let it go too quickly, or you don't give something enough time, or you don't apply to it in some way. So stick at it. Whatever's going to come about at this time is purposeful. And yet you can put a positive attitude on a difficulty or a disappointing result, but it's not just that. It's about what do you learn from it? What do you take away from it? And is it possible to actually use what's happened and turn it into something else? That Saturn-Neptune conjunction is all about the realization of dreams, but also the realization that dreams cannot be the way you envision them. So it's the ability to fashion something out of what hasn't come out the way you thought it would, that can also turn out to be the thing that you want it to be, better than what you had hoped. I feel very optimistic about this period of time, by the way. Even if you're going through a tough time, Sag, I think there's a lot of resolution here. Capricorn. This is an important full moon because it's actually not only, I was talking about this at the beginning of my video here, I was talking about the angular houses, the cardinal houses, the cardinal points. And of course, here you are, Capricorn, you are a cardinal sign, and the full moon is in your cardinal 10th house, and the sun is in your cardinal 4th house. So it's one of the more important full moons of the year. Could it be about a home situation? Are you thinking of moving home? Has something happened to the home itself and it needs attention? Is this about who lives in your home? Are there to be changes of people who occupy your space? I mean, this could be anything from perhaps kids leaving to go to university or something like that. Or maybe if you are sharing a place, there's going to be a change in who you're sharing your abode with. But of course, it's more important than that. This full moon is about the roots of life. It's about cycles of life that reach an end and then a new one begins. So you may be very aware at this time of the passage of time. You know, you may be finding yourself, reminiscing about the past, maybe thinking about people you've lost, members of the family who are no longer with you, and feeling very emotional about all of that. And of course, it's good to think about the people we've loved and lost. It's good to remember they're still in our lives in some way. But what you don't want to do is to become caught up in that to the extent that makes you feel fearful about losing other members of the family or other things related to that kind of theme getting to be too much for you. Yes, it could be moving home, or, as I said, moving things around the home, moving the furniture, let's put it that way. But the moon, of course, is in the area of aspiration. It's the area of career. Now, not everybody has a career, so you may think, oh, well, it doesn't apply to me. I'm not interested in that. But you tell me anybody who doesn't have an aspiration, who hasn't got something they're looking forward to or they would like to have happen, or indeed anyone who doesn't require some material substance in their life. And this full moon is all about. It's about getting, it's about, yes, it's about career on the one hand. And is this, is my career delivering what I hoped it would deliver? Am I being paid enough? Is this okay? Or does it need changing? Does it need ending? And of course, sometimes we don't have any choice in the matter and we lose a job for one reason or another. So that may be on some Capricorn's list of potential. I think it's also a time to measure up to or look at, how things are measuring up in terms of where we wanted to be at this age. Is everything where we wanted? And if not, then things have to change. Sometimes I think about this axis of the axis of, life, whether it's how much you spend in work and out in the world, and how much is spent in your private life. It's getting the balance, the life-work balance correct. And something around the time of this full moon is going to make you look at that. Have you got that balance right? And of course, adjustments should be made in the wake of those understandings. We can see this very important Kite configuration here the minute Venus comes into the mix. And especially if you're a December Capricorn, then things really are at a tipping point here. Things are either going to materialize and they're going to help you move where you want to move, and I'm using that metaphorically, or you're going to realize this isn't going to work. This isn't going to happen, and adjustments will have to be made accordingly. Aquarius. This full moon falls in the axis of travel and communication. The sun is moving through the area of far horizons. The moon is in your small world. We think of the ninth house as the bigger world. We look at the third house as a smaller world. But of course, these are metaphors. They're not literally the big wide world or the small world of your neighborhood, although they can be. We're talking about the things that are close to home, that are of importance, that are an immediate circle of knowledge. And then we look in the ninth house for things that are beyond that small circle. We go out into the world. We go beyond. So this may have something to do with travel. Maybe you are planning a journey, and so you're getting all the ticketing done and all of that is very exciting. Or maybe you're actually on your way, and so you will have completed a journey on this full moon. It's actually literal, it's not just metaphorical. But of course, we can take journeys and make journeys in all sorts of other ways. And maybe that too is significant for you. There's something you've been working on, something that's been a bit of a process. It could even be a legal matter or have legal implications, that you're at the end of it. This is done now. And you're left with the result, whether you're happy with the result or not. Well, we have to wait and see, but it's done, it's completed. But I think too, especially if you're interested in astrology, which you probably are if you're listening to me, that this has a lot to do with our beliefs and our interest in things that are sort of beyond understanding in a way. And I think that this full moon could be something that makes you realize that, you really have a great interest in this area. It is more meaningful than you thought it was, and that this may be something to pursue in a way to add extra meaning to life. That's one thing that I think about when I look at this full moon on this axis. But I also have to look at this configuration, as you can see, with Venus and Pluto, Uranus, and Neptune and Saturn. We've got this kite configuration. There's a little bit of tension here as well. And this is the first thing that strikes me. Is it that you wish to do something? There's something you have an aspiration for, something that you like to have happen. And it may take a long time. You're thinking about the years ahead. But someone is standing in your way, or there is opposition from something that means, you know what, I can't get this to come right. I can't get it where I want it to be. That could be part and parcel of this configuration. But that doesn't mean that you should abandon your view or your aspiration or your idea of where you want to be in 5, 10, 15, 20 years' time. It means it's time for a readjustment. And maybe there is some sacrifice in that. Remember, Saturn and Neptune at the apex, part of that struck Venus opposition Saturn and Neptune. There's sacrifice in there. And it's like you can't take everything with you. You can't have your cake and eat it too. Something needs to be shared. You've got to give up something. I'm not telling you what it is. It's up to you. But in order to get where you want to go, something has to be given up. Okay, Aquarius? Finally, Pisces, the last sign of the zodiac, and on this occasion, the last sign that I'm talking to. Now you have been through a very intense 6 to 8 weeks to have 2 eclipses affecting your sign. The first, of course, 7th of September, was in Pisces, total eclipse. And the second, 21st of September, was in your opposite sign. So you've had a lot going on. And, in some ways, when I look at this full moon coming up on the 6th or 7th of October, I think it's like, okay, we're done. We can package all that now. We can pack it and we're done with it. It's over. We've processed it. We've gone through all sorts of portals and we looked at it this way, looked at it that way, but we're done with it. We're done. It's done. Now, this full moon is on the financial axis, the 2nd, 8th house. It's both about the finances you share with other people. So that means banks, lending institutions, credit card companies, business partners, life partners. We all share finances with them. But it's also about what you earn, what you make financially, what you have in terms of assets, you personally. So this full moon says 2 things. Either you're ready to combine these things with another person, with another company, so that, let's take this as a very easy one to understand. You're actually going to borrow from a mortgage company to pay for the house you live in. That would be a complete understanding of this full moon on the 2nd, 8th axis. But of course, we can have issues all around that. Is this about buying a house, selling a house? Is it about divvying up the property and money and in the wake of a divorce? It could be all these things. Or is it an inheritance? Is it a settlement coming to you? We can look at all these things because the idea of that full moon is closure and completion. It's done. Its finances are in there somewhere, however remotely they're in there. And this is also about your value and your value to another person or to other people. It's all wrapped up in that. So Pisces as a sign is very selfless. You're not one of the big I ams of the zodiac. You tend to underrate yourself, and you tend to, let people, I won't say walk all over you because you don't, but you do give way too often when perhaps you wouldn't want to do something. You do it because, you do it. So I think this is about empowerment. You need to be a little bit more aware of your own power. You need to be a little bit more aware of your own virtues, your own assets, your own personal assets, and your own assets in terms of, whatever you own. And you need to have more faith in those, more a sense of they represent who you are. And in that way, what you bring to the table in any negotiation is considerable. So that's something to bear in mind. Should you find yourself in a position where you have to argue your case, you have to prove your worth, and that may come up on this full moon. If we look again at the axis, not the axis, the angles that everything is making, we look at this kite configuration, we can see Venus coming into the area of shared finances. We can see it opposing Saturn and Neptune, hooked up to Uranus and Pluto. And so it's sort of like focusing on the Saturn-Neptune conjunction itself, Neptune being your ruling planet, and Saturn still in Pisces at the moment. So it is about being real, but not losing your dreams in the process. And I think that's so important. If something happens at this time and you feel you've got to give up something, or you've got the short end of the stick, as it were, I think what you need to appreciate is you don't have to throw away your dream because of it. It's just part of the journey. And I think, again, as I've said to 3 or 4 signs individually on this video, the idea of the great sine wave of life, from desolation to consolation, from failure to success, that is still continuing all the time. And when we're at the bottom of the wave and we feel we've lost everything or nothing can get worse, we're at that point where things are going to start their upward climb towards success and fulfillment and happiness and consolation. So that's also worth thinking of at this time. But what I would say, Pisces, and I don't mean to be at all kind of accusatory here, but sometimes you do get into this victim role, and it's who does that serve? You've got power, you have value, and I think it's time that you embrace that a little bit more. It'll make a difference to your negotiations. And you may be surprised at, once you're embracing your power, just what a different result you get, whether it's financial, whether it's emotional, whether it's career-wise, whether it's with the family, whatever it may be. Okay, Pisces? So here we are. I have gone through all 12 signs, and it's such an interesting full moon. And I think we're going to find it very interesting when we get there, and all the sort of things that I pointed out on this video, get to test them out and see, how that makes sense once it comes around. But I did say right at the very beginning that I wanted to talk a little bit about fear. And that's because these big alignments, having presided over such a lot of conflict in the world, such a lot of extremism and division. It's scary. And of course, I mentioned things like, we need to look at what Putin and Russia are doing. They're being provocative, but let's not forget, they're not just being provocative by sending drones, and planes into Europe. They're also cutting undersea cables, interfering in our social media, all of it. There is a war going on already. What we're looking at is how things progress from this point. And of course, all that is very fearful. And it's not my job to make everybody feel scared to death. That's not my intention. What I want to do with the subject of fear, fear is useful. If we weren't fearful about things, we just step blindly off that cliff. And I think really if the fool in the tarot pack who is stepping blindly off the cliff, looking up in the air, how gorgeous is this, only to descend to the ground. And that fear, it keeps us cautious, it keeps us aware. We are more aware when we're a little bit more fearful. And so that's a good thing. And we need to be looking at situations in our own life as much as situations that are going on everywhere, just seeing where they're taking us to. But at the same time, recognizing that this is just a passage for humanity. I think if we could, take a step back, we had some magic wand and we could see ourselves 100 years in advance, and we would look back at this period, we would see where we were going to. And that journey to where we will be going to, or where we are going to, is what we're taking now. And it's why it seems so difficult. But I think if we can do it with courage, and that means facing our individual challenges with courage, whether they're financial, whether they are physical to do with our health, whether they are emotional to do with our loves, and, all the things that we find precious, and the things in life that causes our biggest hurts and our biggest agonies. If we think of the challenges we get there and we work our way through them, coming out the other side of them, we're always stronger. We're always better for that experience. And this is what we're doing as humanity. We are going through this incredible time when people are opposed to each other. There are divisions in politics, divisions in everything, and divisions between countries, within countries. We see it everywhere. But at some point through that comes consensus. We'll go through the fire, out the other side. And we are taking this journey for the rest of humanity. So don't be fearful. Drop the fear. When we drop the fear, everything becomes clearer. And when we feel emboldened by the strength of our own resolve, we are powerful. Think about these things. I do all the time. So bye for now. I look forward to seeing you next time on my next video. Bye for now.